Okay, so this should be the final installment, I think part 5 of the crankshaft pinning job on a second generation Dodge Viper with an ATI Super Balancer, plus some other work like the power steering pulley upgrade, but I'll get to that in a minute. So as you can see here, I've already got everything put back together. So some things I'm just going to have to describe verbally and try to get you a view of things. So from the, let's see, the last video, if I remember correctly, I had the balancer hub mounted onto the crankshaft, and then I was working on pinning the crankshaft. So I have here the stock balancer, so I'll just use this to make an illustrative point. So essentially, with the balancer on, I had pre-drilled the balancer with the 2 pinning holes with it out of the car to make it easier to finish the drilling job when it's mounted in the car, because when it's out of the car, it just has to do with your body position, right? If it's out of the car, I can put it on the floor and just press down on the drill. I get a lot more leverage. It makes the job a lot easier. When you're in the car, you're hunched over this engine bay and your arm is trying to push in from the side. You can't apply nearly as much torque, or pressure rather, to push a drill in this way across your body. So it's a lot easier to do as much as you can outside of the car. So I had the 2 holes pre-drilled, mounted that onto the crankshaft. That was a lot of work. And then all I had to do was just finish drilling the other half of the hole deeper down in the balancer hub onto the crankshaft snout. So once again, you use your metal cutting lubricant here, right? Put it on the drill bit, slot it in. And what I had to do actually, it might be better if I try to show you. So I have an angle drill. It's a Makita corded angle drill. And remember, I was doing this with the air intakes removed and the power steering pulley off, the power steering pump put to the side, and the bracket off to give as much space as I can in here. Now, even with that, and with that hub, here, let me see if I can get a light in there. So that right there, that's the crankshaft pulley. So just imagine the balancer hub is mounted on that. The space from there to that guy right there, that's your power steering rack, is not that large. And so what I had to do was basically insert the drill bit into one of the holes, and then bring the drill in, and then chuck it to the drill bit while the drill is in the hole, and then drill it in. Now, when the hub is outside of the car, you can use a lower drill speed and more pressure, which is what the instructions recommend, to preserve the drill bit. But because you're coming in from the side, you can't apply as much force. You have to use a higher drill speed to compensate for the lack of pressure that you're able to apply to the drill, which is even more reason to use that cutting lubricant, okay? But nonetheless, you drill one hole, and the thing is, this is the fun part, you can only really get into one hole at a time, because the 2 holes that you're using to pin the crankshaft are on opposite sides of each other. So you know, if one of the holes is sort of pointing up a little bit, okay, you can reach that hole. But then that means the other hole is pointing down, and that power steering rack is going to be in the way. So now you have to rotate the crankshaft to get that other hole up so you can reach that one. So how do you do that? Well, Boosted Motorsports, another YouTube channel that makes really good content for Vipers, he had a great idea, and I used his advice. So what he says is to put the car in first gear, take the e-brake off, and then basically you pull on the wheel. So you like hold here and you pull, and that's going to pull the car forward just like an inch or so, and then you release and the car settles back. And you keep doing that about 1,000,000 bazillion times, and eventually that crankshaft's going to turn over. So you're like manually turning the crankshaft very, very slowly. That was a lot of work. Just as a side comment, that was like doing reps in the weight room at a gym. It was not easy. So good to have a fan around, especially if it's a hot day, because you're going to be sweating your nuts off doing something like that. But no matter. So then you rotate the crankshaft, and then again, put the drill bit in, then chuck the drill onto the drill bit, and then do the drilling job, and then take the drill off, and then take the drill bit out. You got to do it one piece at a time because of the amount of space that you have. So once that's done, then you take the roll pins and you hammer those in. And again, you're doing things from the side, so it'll take a bit of hammering to get it in there. And as you're doing it, you might miss and you might hit the balancer hub with the hammer. That's okay as long as you're hitting it from the front. It's not really going to do anything. But you might ding up like the outer rim of the balancer hub surface, which is kind of important because then your balancer has to mount over that outer rim and slot into the back of the balancer hub. So then you have to maybe file that down to try to smooth it out. And what I found is, well, actually, I'll get to that now. So when I was mounting the balancer onto the balancer hub, and again, it's hard to see because it's kind of blocked by that pulley there, but I didn't know how far I had to go in because it wouldn't slot in very easily. I couldn't just use my hand to push it in, which creates another problem because these balancers are meant to be rebuildable, and you have to rebuild them every so often depending on how you use them. So then to rebuild it, I don't know how I'm going to get that balancer off. I may have to like pull the whole thing off with the hub, which is a pain in the butt. But nonetheless, when you're pressing it in, what you'll notice is for this particular unit on this particular car, that balancer is going to push far enough in that the hub, if we go over here, there's going to be a little sort of nub like this on the balancer hub that's going to protrude outwards about 1/16 of an inch from the actual balancer itself. So imagine this is the balancer surface, and that mounts onto the hub. And as you push it all the way in, you're going to see this inner portion of the balancer hub sticking out just a little bit, about 1/16 of an inch. That's how you'll know it's all the way in. You'll also know if you mount it the way I did, where I seated the balancer onto the hub, and then I put the crankshaft pulley on, and I used 2 bolts on opposite sides of each other, and I just cranked it down one by one, bit by bit each time until it was fully tightened down, and I couldn't crank it down any further. That's also how you know it's fully on, and sure enough, you get that little bit of a sort of a nub there. Now, what I found was when I tried to put the pulley on, that this sort of rim here was it appeared to be a little bit larger than the inner circle of the pulley. It wasn't quite seating around this and onto the balancer itself. Now, that could be because this portion of the rim was a little bit damaged. So even though I tried to file it down, maybe that wasn't enough. So then I took the inner circle of the pulley and I used a Dremel sanding bit, and I just sanded out a little bit of material on the inner circle of that pulley, and then used some emery cloth to sort of smooth that out. And then it's slotted right on, no problem. So then with that mounted like that, then the pulley is correctly aligned to the other pulleys. Okay, so if we go over here, right, you see that crankshaft pulley lines up with the power steering pulley. I think that's the AC pulley down there. It's your alternator pulley, or that's your alternator, right? So this is the pulley for the alternator. These all line up, right? You don't want that pulley to be offset to the left or the right a little bit, because there are ribs in these pulleys, and this belt essentially has to be perfectly straight. If it has to twist or move, then that means when the engine's running, it's going to rip the belt off. So that's all aligned. But before you even mount that pulley, you have to, well, at least the order that I did it was to put the crankshaft bolt on. Okay, so I pinned the crankshaft, put the pins in. When the pins were in, there was a little portion of the pins that were sticking out a little bit, so you have to get a Dremel, grinding bit and grind that down so you have a nice flat surface here, because the crankshaft bolt is going to mount onto this. It has to mount onto a flat surface. So you do that. I used an ARP crankshaft bolt, and the way that I did it is, and it was a recommendation from the Viper Club forums, you put the grease that they give you in that ARP sort of kit. Why is this losing focus? What's going on? Okay, So they give you this grease that they say is supposed to go onto the threads as well as the washer on both sides. But the recommendation I got elsewhere was to only use Loctite on the threads and to only use the grease between the bolt head and the washer. So that way the bolt head can spin against the washer, and then you're using Loctite to help lock down the threads inside the crankshaft snap. So that's what I did. And I cranked it to the factory specification, which is 250 pound-feet. There's been some discussion elsewhere about how difficult that is to do. I found it's actually not that bad. And the trick that I used is I did a few things. So I got wheel chocks and I put them in front of the rear wheels. So that's step 1. Step 2, turn the e-brake on. Step 3, put the car in 6th gear. That's it. That's all you have to do. And then you get your torque wrench. And again, I'm using this space in here because I had the power steering unit sort of disassembled and put aside. So I have more space in here to run the torque wrench this way. And it's a Craftsman torque wrench. This guy right here goes up to 250 pound-feet. In addition to this, I have a 2-inch pipe that I used at the end of the torque wrench to extend it further to give me more torque. And, you know, it takes some effort, but it wasn't that bad. You know, you just keep cranking and eventually you get to 250, it clicks, click, click, and then you're done. That wasn't nearly as hard as I thought it would be. So that's everything with mounting the ATI Super Balancer, pinning the balancer and the crankshaft with that unit, and mounting the pulley. The next step was to do the power steering pulley and bracket upgrade. This is from IPSCO. It's a very simple install, especially compared to that monster in there. The bracket's very straightforward. You take the old bracket off, put the new one on, and then when you do the pulley installation, and you'll see it in the instructions if you buy it, but there's a little hub that you mount onto the shaft for the power steering pump, and you have to like slot a flathead screwdriver into an opening in that hub to let it slide in. And then you take this center screw here with a washer, you tighten it down finger tight, and then you push the hub up to the washer and then pull the screwdriver out. And you're supposed to have about 0.1 inches clearance between the back of the hub and the body of your power steering pump. The instructions say 0.07 to 0.1 inches plus or minus 0.01 inches. What I found for me is that when I finger tightened it down, I did have a gap, but it was less than that. It was more like 0.05 inches. Still some clearance, but I figured just to play on the safe side here, because I wanted to try to replicate what the instructions were saying, I unscrewed a little bit that center screw, right, this one right here, just a little bit at a time, and pushed the hub forward until I got to somewhere around 0.1 inches, like 0.08 to 0.1 inches in this gap here. Then I pulled that flathead screwdriver out of the hub to lock it down onto the shaft. Then you mount the pulley. Then you take this screw out, put Loctite on, tighten it, and put it back in and tighten it down. So that's pretty easy. So that's it. Yeah, again, the main reason I wanted to make this is because although there's information out there on the ATI Super Balancers, and there's information out there on pinning the crankshaft, they're not all put together in one piece, right? Most videos you see about pinning the crankshaft use the stock balancer hub, or balancer. So doing it with the ATI unit, it's a little bit different. It's not entirely different, it's a little bit different. And then seeing how the ATI balancer actually installs on the Viper. How close is it supposed to be? What should you expect to see when it's mounted? Are you too far in or out or whatever? How are you going to know? So the short answer to that is you just lock it all the way down, because it's going to self-limit as you're mounting it. Okay, at least for me, that happened to be the case, and everything lines up perfectly. Okay, so yeah, I hope you found this informative. In the future, next steps I want to mount a catch can somewhere in here with some hose connecting to the top of the power steering fluid cap. And also, this is a little bit cracked here. I want to maybe get some silicone sealant and just try to seal this up. That doesn't look so great. But yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.